Shabbat Shalom. So I want you to imagine that you are back 100,000 years ago, maybe 50,000 if you like. You are in one of the many caves in Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, although of course it has no name at that time. And many of the remains that have been found there of the early Homo sapiens show that they were avid hunters. Oh, yes, they also gathered as much as they could, but hunting was a very important, if sometimes uneven, source of nourishment for your clan, your tribe, your group and family huddled there in the cave. How do you decide where you're going to try and hunt tomorrow? How do you figure that out? Follow trails. Okay, but there are trails everywhere. The land is full of animals. We know from the archaeological record, as well as the record specifically within the caves, that there was game of wide variety, a much wider ecosystem now, much wider ecosystem than we see now. So you can't just walk out your door, because after all, you are rolling the dice. Remember, when you step out that door, when you go out of your hut, out of your cave, not only do you run the risk of finding a lion, which were common in ancient Israel, you might bump up against other predatory animals, or you might come home empty-handed. Now, coming home empty-handed, if you go fishing today, is not such a problem. You just stop by Publix and you can buy a trout and pretend like it was yours. But if you come home empty-handed, having expended a huge amount of calories hiking around the hills looking for something to eat, well, you're one step closer to starvation. So it's not so simple as to say, I'll go out and see what I can find. That was not how our ancestors learned to hunt and survive. So what would you do? Look for water. Okay, you're all thinking too much like individuals, right? You are a family. You are a tribe. Stick together, great. Work together, great. But work together means each person around the campfire, the night before, makes a suggestion. Each person says, I think we should go down to the watering hole because we've always got animals there. Someone else says, well, I think we should go back to where we were last week because if you remember, there was a whole herd of those giant aurochs, those re'em as they're called in Hebrew, the giant beasts. Someone else says, well, you know, I think we should stay away from the forest because when I was gathering some nuts the other day, I swear I saw droppings of a lion, and we do not want to be tangling with that. And so on and so forth around the campfire. Each would make a suggestion. Now, is that the end of the problem, or is that we just sit down and vote? What happens when someone makes a suggestion? We should go after those giant aurochs, those huge cows standing 6, 7, 8 feet at the shoulder with horns that stretch wider than my arms. You can see an example in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem of the leftover, not the living version, because they're extinct. What would your response be if I were to tell you, hey, let's take our little pointy sticks and go try and kill one of those? Because there's got to be a lot of meat on them. What's that? No, that seems stupid, Grundar. What's my little pointy stick going to do to that? I mean, even if we all work together, that's a big risk for a big reward, but maybe not the right calculation to be making right now. Maybe if we were desperate, we might try that. But before desperation sets in, let's try and hunt one of those nice, fluffy, like hill goats. You know, the ones that don't look like they could kill you accidentally. Let's go try one of those, or maybe let's go try to fish, or maybe we should go catch some birds. There would be alternatives. You see, what happens is that there is good evidence in human societies that what we do is what's called the wisdom of the group, which is to say each person puts out an idea, and then the other members of the group will pick it apart. Not maliciously, not antagonistically, but as you've probably all known in your own life, we are better at finding fault with someone else's idea than we are at finding fault with our own. This is why it's so maddeningly difficult to proofread something you wrote compared to proofreading something that someone else wrote. It is why it is extremely hard when you are trying to do a project to see all of the problems you might encounter and how to overcome them. And yet it becomes transparent when you are reviewing someone else's project and able to see all of those same types of flaws. This is not because humans are malicious or because we just like hurting other people's ideas or even that we are too jealous and protective of our own. It simply seems to be an efficient way of getting things done. If everybody throws out an idea and then everybody critiques the other ideas, then we get ideas fast and then we get ideas right. And that seems to be the important combination. We need information as quickly as possible in order to be able to gather the possible options that we've got. And then we need to actually slow down once it's all on the table to figure out what is the right one, because choosing the wrong option could mean death on the horn of a giant bull-like creature, or it could mean coming home with a full basket of meat that is going to feed the family for days. This seems to have worked out pretty well, and we see modern manifestations of this. Anybody here who has used Wikipedia knows that Wikipedia tries to get the facts out there and then refresh them and refine them according to accuracy to try and continue to improve what has been generated. Likewise, so many studies have been done showing that if you put a group together and you ask them to solve a math problem, a logic problem, or do some other types of work, allowing them to work together to collaborate in this manner yields far superior results. That we are all smarter together than we are individually. No matter what your individual genius level may be, you will never be as smart as everyone when it comes to this type of thinking. Clear? You're all convinced? Great. So what on earth happened with the Ben Ali Hospital news story? Oh dear. Yeah, wisdom of the crowd? Did I say that? So first of all, just a quick reminder for those of you who don't recognize the name, this is the news story that dominated the early part of the week that initially was claimed by many media sources that Israel had bombed a hospital in Gaza, killing more than 500 people. That information came out within minutes of the explosion having been noticed, and the recordings were quickly circulated, and that became the dominant story. Now, was this the wisdom of crowds? No. Why not? What was different? Because social media gives us the illusion that we are engaging in that same campfire behavior when we are planning where we're going to go hunting tomorrow. But there were some fundamental flaws in the way social media does it, and is then subsequently picked up by, well, presumably journalism, although the word is under attack lately because many of them have been failing. More on that later. But what is the problem with using this social media crowdsourcing to uncover the truth behind this incident? All right, so the hurry to get the story out, we're going to hold off on that one because that's actually the journalistic failure. But the first people who released the story were not journalists. The first people who made statements about this were not reporters. They didn't have press tags and press credentials. We're going to come back to that because that is exactly the problem that the journalists had. And we'll talk about why that exacerbates the issue. But the first release of information was not from journalists, and that's part of the problem. Is it possible that people wanted a reason to be upset? Well, people already had a reason to be upset if you were opposed to Israel taking actions against Hamas. What they needed was not a reason to be upset, but a reason to convince others that they should be outraged. They needed a catastrophe in order to claim the moral high ground. And in fact, the people that were opposed to Israel's actions in Gaza were desperate for anything that could overshadow the murderous rampage that Hamas had unleashed upon Israel and all of the grisly atrocities that they had committed, because it didn't look good. And the world community was kind of saying, Hamas, that's bad. That's really, really bad. That's bad. And those that were in support of Hamas were desperate for Israel to, quote, do something worse in order to then justify, or more importantly, cover over, erase, move the news cycle onward from the atrocities that Hamas had committed. And so indeed, those that were in support of Hamas leapt on this like a leopard would leap on you when you were bending down to get a drink in the ancient world, to try and promote, because it was the perfect storm. It was a hospital, so therefore clearly, you know, an innocent zone, and there was a high count, whether or not there really was, we'll come back to, and that meant that it could be shared immediately, and they knew that it would get attention very, very quickly. Yes, we'll keep working our way across.
When you're in the campfire.
Back in the cave.
Yeah. When I was young. Okay. You got criticism or negative view from others. When you're on social media, you don't get critical views from others.
Social media, in many ways, counterintuitively, isolates the individual from true criticism from their social peers. As was being said, if you were back in your actual campfire and you come up with a stupid idea, then the caveman sitting next to you is going to whack you in the head and say, don't be an idiot. We're not going to do that. And that would teach you, you know what, maybe that idea was a little off-center. Social media, despite the fact that it is so public and despite the fact that there is such violent disagreement across it, actually insulates you from somebody in your personal community telling you to stop, that you are wrong, and if you persist, that there will be social consequences to you. We may complain about the whole cancel culture and all of that, which has become an unfortunate buzzword, but society, communities, families have always used social pressure to help regulate the behavior of individuals. If someone came to you and bragged about how they had just stolen a new iPad from Best Buy, I would be willing to wager that the group in this room would kind of sort of say, that doesn't sound very cool, and not support them in this and say, you know, you probably should return it, and you know, that's a criminal activity. That's cancel culture if you are telling a person that what they have done is wrong. That doesn't work well in social media because in that campfire setting, there is a presumption that all of us around the fire are on the same team. Everybody wants to get meat tomorrow. Sorry, vegetarians, back then definitely that was true. Everybody wants meat tomorrow. And we want to work together to get meat because we know that working together increases our chance of success. And that means that when you attack my idea, you're not attacking me, you're attacking something that could be a digression, could be a mistake that would keep us from achieving that shared goal. You see the difference there? When you attack my idea when we're on the same team, it's because you want to improve the outcome of the team for all of us. Social media, not so much. In social media, there is not a shared assumption that we are on the same team, unfortunately. And that means when you attack my idea or I attack your idea, there is no generous interpretation going on in the back of my mind. Oh, they're just trying to help us refine the idea through the wisdom of crowds in order to be able to get better and better at whatever the topic is. It is, no, you are attacking my idea because you attack me. It is personal and it is deeply invasive when being attacked on this type of platform. It gives the illusion of creating this crowdsourcing of ideas while actually removing all of the protections and all of the guidance that is meant to come from it. Yes? All right, so there is an issue with also the timeline in which information is released, mainly because, hold on, we don't always know everything within the first 30 seconds of something happening. I know, it takes time, research, investigations before more information can actually be found, but there is a desperate incentive to take advantage of what you describe as the halo effect, meaning that the first notice, the first information, the first headline is going to become more durable in the minds of many people. People remember the headline, they do not remember the retraction, even if a retraction does come. And that means there is a perverse incentive to give an interpretation of an event at precisely the time when you have the least amount of information to interpret that event. But hey, if your goal is not to actually interpret the event as it was, but to interpret the event because of your goal, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how true your statement is. What matters is that it is fast. What matters is that it is on point, on message. And what matters is that it is outrageous enough to get attention that will be very, very difficult for others who wish to go slowly to ignore and to be erased from people's minds once additional information comes out. This is a perfect example that Hamas almost had to. Almost were backed into a corner the moment this happened. Even if they had any doubts at all, they knew that they needed to act as soon as possible because once the clock is ticking, the evidence was going to work against them. And once the clock was ticking, they needed to make sure they could make a statement that would galvanize support, especially in other parts of the Arab and Muslim world, for what they were currently trying to do. And that meant that the truth of the matter was entirely secondary to what they were doing, which of course brings us back to our question of the media. Then we get the perverse incentive that even those who don't have an ideological axe to grind, even those who are not involved in the actual conflict, presenting themselves as somehow honest brokers of truth, even a good media outlet, not ones that are hopelessly corrupt with bias, is still desperate for a paycheck. They still need attention. They still need to be putting out articles incredibly fast, and they need to be doing so in a way that will get the attention of us, the jaded news consumer. And that means there is indeed a complicity incentive to also take outrageous claims and put them out immediately in order to be able to generate that those views, the clicks, the feeds. Yes.
We have another problem too. It's not well, social media is a big problem, and but when we have people in our conference, like Ocasio-Cortez, on the website right away, Israel bombed the hospital, and all the bad things she's doing to all the Palestinians, and but since U.S. intelligence and Israeli intelligence just proved that she has not taken down her statement as of last night.
Yes, and then we get in. Of course it's a problem, because it's undermining the entire principle that I began with, which is that there is a wisdom in a group. There's a reason why I believe in democracy. It's a reason why, in general, societies that allow people to express opinions and to investigate each other's opinions are healthier and stronger. But it only works if we are willing to say, oops, I made a mistake, and even better, prior to making that mistake, actually trying to only advance ideas that are fully in good faith for the good of the community to which you are speaking. And when those two fail, and they have failed spectacularly with the current Israel-Gaza conflict, then we are outside the wisdom of crowds. Then we are into entire propaganda issues, and that undermines the people's belief that anything is true, even the truth, which is why once it came out from fairly quick crowdsourcing information, irony of irony, that before even Israel was making final statements and before the US intelligence and French intelligence and so many other groups have made the statements that this was a failed Islamic Jihad launch, actually the internet crowd had figured it out. They had gone back through the various videos, because this is a very recorded war, And they went and did the GPS checking. There's whole groups out there that love just trying to figure out where a picture was taken from and what they're seeing in it and how many miles is away. And they had already worked it out before the next breakfast that this was a failed Palestinian missile launch that had landed in that parking lot of the hospital. And then, of course, by the time dawn came and we had photos of the hospital, we realized the hospital wasn't destroyed. We realized that there had been a conflagration in the parking lot, but not actual destruction of the building, let alone the patients inside of the building. And everything continued to confirm those initial ideas that this was, in fact, a failed rocket launch from the Palestinians intended for Israel, but that had crashed within the territory of Gaza. A tragedy, of course, for the people who died, but not a tragedy that was committed in the way that Hamas had claimed in the early moments.
You stole my word earlier about the justification. They're looking for justice. But it's more than that. They're looking for to create more hostility.
Of course, yes.
And to create more hate towards Israel and towards the Jews.
Right. I mean, as we talk about the underlying motivation of Hamas, which again is a tragedy that they should have risen to be the leadership of the Palestinians, because the Palestinians do not do well by having their interests portrayed as Hamas talking points. But yes, Hamas knows that it has no opportunity to overcome Israel by itself. The only way it can do it is to galvanize international effort to overturn Israel, the state, in their mind. And that means that they are absolutely constantly on the lookout for things that they can use to mobilize that type of sympathy, even if it's a lie. So again, once people have made the statements, I am reminded of the adage, most people don't believe what they ought to believe. People believe what they want to believe until there has been enough evidence and outcry in their community to force them to stop believing that. Classically, this is called confirmation bias, but it is weaponized, really, in many circumstances. Well, everybody plays on emotions. That's not unique to Hamas. Everybody plays on emotions. Trust me, the emotions in the Jewish community are very hot right now, too. And there's nothing wrong with having emotions. But you do still need actual information. And that's why Israel has tried generally to be very careful about how it released both the images as well as the details of the Hamas attack into Israel, to make sure that they were being accurate as possible. Yes, there were some statements made that may or may not have had a perfect vetting of every detail, but there was nothing that Israel as a state has had to substantially retract due to being erroneous. And that's a very important standard we are supposed to keep. But no, there's going to be emotions in all of this, but we don't allow our emotions to let us lie. And we don't allow our emotions to tell us we can continue to make statements or continue to avoid retracting previous statements because we wish our previous statement was right, because we feel like it's right even in the face of counter evidence. So we're going to have to wrap it up here, but I will again make myself available for conversation during the Kiddush to continue to talk not only about this but about other things. But I want you to reflect on the power of how we can look at situations, how we must take in information from all sources without taking in a narrative that is being spun around it. That we sometimes are going to frustratingly have to wait until we have more information to be able to make a determination. The same way that Hamas was not in a position to say that Israel did it that first moment, nor could Israel immediately say it didn't do it. It took it a little time before it could make that statement with confidence. And we should learn from Israel's example there, that we don't either accuse or deny immediately, but that we wait. We are, those of us that are seeking peace and justice in the world, on the same team. We are around that same campfire. And it behooves us to make sure that we act like it, or else those that wish to kick the embers in our face are going to have a field day. Shabbat Shalom.